There are moments in life that strip away every title, every credential, and every carefully constructed public image, leaving behind only the raw truth of who a person really is. For Hoda Kotb, that moment arrived not on a red carpet, not in a television studio, and not during one of the thousands of interviews she has conducted over her nearly three-decade career. It arrived quietly, in the dark hours of early February 2026, when a phone call from someone she loves changed everything she thought she had settled about her life. At 61 years old, Hoda Kotb had walked away from the most famous morning news desk in America. She had made her peace with the cameras, the 4 a.m. wake-up calls, and the relentless pace of live television. She had traded all of it for something she considered far more valuable: breakfast with her daughters, school drop-offs, neighborhood walks, and the quiet dignity of being fully present for her family. And then, in the span of a single week, all of that peace was interrupted by something that no retirement plan, no wellness app, and no amount of personal reinvention could prepare her for. A crisis that tested the very definition of friendship. What happened next revealed something about Hoda Kotb that years of morning television had never quite shown the world. It revealed that beneath the warm smile, the contagious laugh, and the carefully polished broadcaster was a woman who operates from a code of loyalty so deep that it overrides comfort, convenience, and even the quiet life she had so deliberately built for herself. This is the story of what Hoda said, what she did, and what it all means, not just for a television show, but for the kind of friendship that most people only read about. To understand why Hoda Kotb's return to the Today Show in February 2026 meant so much, you first have to understand what she had given up to live the life she wanted. In September 2024, Hoda stood before the cameras she had known for decades and told the world she was done. Not done in a bitter, exhausted way, but done in the way that a person is done when they have finally given themselves permission to want something different. She had turned 60 that summer, and by her own account, the milestone felt less like a door closing and more like a window opening onto something she had been ignoring for years. In a memo she sent to the Today staff at the time of her announcement, she wrote with characteristic warmth about the two things that could both be true at the same time: that she loved the show deeply, and that it was time for her to leave. She spoke about her daughters, about the slice of the time pie that her family deserved, and about the new decade of her life that was waiting for her. Her final day on the anchor desk, January 10, 2025, was a genuine celebration. NBC opened up a larger studio at 30 Rockefeller Plaza to hold the flood of fans and colleagues who came to say goodbye. It was the kind of send-off that only happens when an entire network sincerely loves someone. After leaving, Hoda did exactly what she said she would do. She moved to Westchester, settled into a rhythm of school runs and early mornings that belonged to her children rather than to a television broadcast, and began building a new chapter under the banner of her company, Joy 101. She was working on a wellness app. She was going to PTA meetings. She was doing the ordinary, irreplaceable things that a working mother misses when the studio lights are on and the teleprompter is rolling. For more than a year, Hoda Kotb was simply a woman living her life on her own terms, and from every account, she was doing it with the same joy and intention she had brought to everything else. That is precisely why what happened in early February 2026 hit so hard. Because when you have finally found your peace, the decision to walk away from it, even temporarily, for someone else is not a small thing. It is a statement about who you are and what you believe in. On the evening of January 31, 2026, Savannah Guthrie's 84-year-old mother, Nancy Guthrie, had dinner with her daughter Annie and son-in-law Tommaso Cioni at her home in the Catalina foothills near Tucson, Arizona. They dropped her off at her house later that evening. She was in good spirits. She was home. And then, by the following morning, she was gone. Nancy Guthrie went missing from her home in the Catalina foothills near Tucson, Arizona, after her son-in-law had dropped her off outside her house late in the evening, and her family noticed she was missing the following day. What began as a missing persons report quickly escalated into something far more alarming. The Pima County Sheriff's Department declared her home a crime scene, with Sheriff Chris Nanos stating that he believed Nancy didn't go willingly from her home. The evidence at the property made it clear that this was not a case of an 84-year-old woman wandering off on her own. This was something deliberate, something targeted, and something that set off a chain of events that would reach all the way from Tucson, Arizona, to a quiet home in Westchester, New York. Savannah Guthrie, who anchors the Today Show every morning alongside Craig Melvin, did what any daughter would do. She left. She stepped away from the cameras, from the desk she had occupied for years, and flew to Arizona to be with her family and to work alongside the FBI and local authorities to find her mother. There was no question about it, no internal debate to be had. Her mother was missing. Everything else could wait. But the Today Show could not wait, and the chair next to Craig Melvin could not sit empty indefinitely. That is when Hoda Kotb made a decision that, according to everyone who witnessed it, required almost no deliberation at all. Hoda Kotb first filled in for Savannah on the February 6th episode of Today, 5 days after Nancy was reported missing from her Tucson home. She did not come back as a guest. She did not come back to do a single segment about the situation and then return to Westchester. She came back to anchor the show. She came back to hold the desk together. She came back because her friend needed someone she trusted to handle the place where she worked, and there was simply no one better suited for that task. On her return, Kotb told her co-hosts and the viewing audience, "You know, Craig, we always talk about our show as a family. We are a family. I am part of the family. I am happy to be with you because we show up for each other." Those words were not scripted filler or network-approved sentiment. They were the distillation of something Hoda had believed for a long time, tested now against circumstances that made the phrase either mean something real or expose it as hollow. The answer was immediate. The words meant something real. Kotb and Guthrie's co-host Craig Melvin were both meant to join NBC's 2026 Winter Olympics press team in Milan, but both stayed behind to hold down the fort in Savannah's absence. For Hoda, this was a significant sacrifice. The Winter Olympics coverage was a major assignment, a high-profile assignment, and the kind of opportunity that does not come around every year. She gave it up without apparent hesitation, choosing instead to sit in Studio 1A every morning and anchor a show that was quietly holding its breath waiting for news from Tucson. When Hoda Kotb speaks on television, there is a quality to her that is genuinely difficult to manufacture. Unlike some broadcasters who have perfected the performance of emotion, Hoda has always been the kind of anchor who seems to be actually feeling whatever she is describing. On February 6, 2026, that quality was on full display, and it moved a lot of people who were watching at home. Hoda began by telling the audience, "This whole thing is breaking my heart, and I'm happy to be sitting here with you." She then went on to speak about the outpouring of national support that had been gathering around the Guthrie family. Vigils, messages from fellow journalists on other networks, prayers from ordinary viewers across the country. She anchored a segment highlighting all of it, making sure that the story stayed in the public consciousness and that the spotlight on the search for Nancy Guthrie did not dim. But the moment that people would talk about for weeks came when Hoda explained, simply and directly, why she was back. She reflected on how Savannah had always shown up for the people she loved, asking aloud, "Who was first in the hospital room when Hope was sick? Savannah. Who hopped on a plane when Carson's parents died? Savannah. Who was sitting by Chanel's late husband? And Craig's brother when he passed? Savannah was there." She was not recounting these things to perform gratitude. She was explaining a ledger of love that she felt obligated to balance. Hoda also shared a message of collective hope for the national audience. There's been a massive show of support, from vigils to people offering positive thoughts online and just a lot of hope. The nation's rallying around our dear friend Savannah and her family, believing their beloved mom Nancy will be back soon in their loving arms. It was a careful, considered thing to say, full of warmth but not reckless optimism. She was walking a tightrope between keeping hope alive and acknowledging the gravity of what was happening in Arizona. Hoda also told viewers about what she had experienced outside the studio. "I was walking through the airport yesterday, flying back here. The number of people who came up and said one thing they kept repeating, 'She's like all of our moms. She's like all of our moms. Tell her we're praying. Tell her we're here.' And I think that's so important. It's touched everybody." Those words, "she's like all of our moms," captured exactly why the story had spread so far beyond the usual audience of morning television. Nancy Guthrie was not famous. She was not a celebrity. She was an 84-year-old woman of deep faith, quiet strength, and fierce independence who raised 3 remarkable children largely on her own after losing her husband at a devastating age. And people recognized her. They saw their own mothers in her. That recognition was something Hoda was able to name and honor on behalf of an audience that needed someone to put it into words. As Hoda anchored the show from New York, the picture emerging from Tucson was deeply unsettling. The sheriff's department had presented a timeline of Nancy's disappearance, noting that her doorbell camera was disconnected at 1:47 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, and though the system detected movement at 2:12 a.m., no video footage was available from that window of time. A masked figure had been seen on other footage near the property. The case was officially being treated as an abduction. By the time the search entered its 5th week, the Guthrie family had raised a reward to $1 million for information leading to Nancy's whereabouts. Savannah released a video with her siblings that was both a public plea and a deeply private moment shared with the world by necessity. In that video, she said, "We still believe in a miracle. We still believe that she can come home, hope against hope. We also know that she may be lost. She may already be gone. She may have already gone home to the Lord that she loves. If this is what is to be, then we will accept it, but we need to know where she is. We need her to come home." Those words, delivered in Savannah Guthrie's steady, measured journalist's voice even as she was speaking about her own mother, illustrated exactly the kind of woman Nancy Guthrie had raised. The iron discipline, the refusal to dissolve publicly, the insistence on staying functional in the middle of the unthinkable. And from across the country, watching from New York, Hoda Kotb understood all of it. She understood it because she knew the story of how Savannah had grown up, raised by a widow who worked at the University of Arizona to put all 3 of her children through college, who attended church every Sunday, who lived alone well into her 80s because independence was not just a habit but a core value. Hoda knew that behind the composure Savannah was showing the cameras, there was a daughter who was terrified. And she knew that the best thing she could do was hold the desk, anchor the broadcasts, and free her friend to do what only she could do in Arizona. One of the most quietly powerful things that happened during this period was something that Hoda helped set into motion through the simplest of gestures. The Today Show team began wearing yellow ribbons. Co-hosts Kotb, Melvin, Carson Daly, and Al Roker all wore yellow ribbons, adopting the practice of Nancy's neighbors in her Catalina Foothills neighborhood of Tucson, and the entire Today studio wore yellow ribbons throughout the week in Nancy's honor. Yellow is the color of waiting. It is the color of hope held carefully in the hands when certainty is nowhere to be found. For generations, yellow ribbons have meant one specific thing in American culture. Someone is not home yet, and we have not stopped waiting for them. By bringing that symbol into Studio 1A, the Today team was doing something more than a tribute. They were making a statement that the search for Nancy Guthrie was not yesterday's story. It was today's story, and it would be tomorrow's story for as long as it needed to be. The move resonated far beyond the studio. Viewers sent in photographs from their own front yards, yellow ribbons tied around trees, yellow flowers placed on porches, yellow fabric fastened to neighborhood gates in Tucson itself. The symbol traveled across the country on social media, carried by people who had never met Nancy Guthrie or Savannah Guthrie but who felt connected to the story in the way that only genuinely human stories can connect strangers. The Today Show's platform became, for those weeks, something more than a morning broadcast. It became a kind of national gathering place for hope. None of that happened by accident. It happened because someone with the wisdom and experience to understand the power of a symbol made a decision to use it. That someone was Hoda. There is a version of this story that is entirely about television, about ratings, about network logistics, about who fills an anchor chair when a co-host is unavailable. That version of the story is not wrong, exactly, but it is incomplete in every way that matters. The true story is about something that does not show up easily in a broadcast or a press release. The unglamorous, demanding, daily work of being someone's real friend. Hoda Kotb and Savannah Guthrie became co-anchors in 2018, making history as the first all-female team to lead the Today Show. But their bond predated the titles and the milestone headlines. They were two reporters who had worked their way up through a competitive industry, sharing the small indignities and large victories of careers that require relentless persistence. They had sat in those anchor chairs through elections, disasters, personal losses, and national celebrations. They had talked on live television about their children, their faith, their fears. They had built something that is genuinely rare in any industry, let alone one as competitive as broadcast news. A friendship that was stronger than the professional relationship it grew from. Kotb said of the show's culture during this time, "Paramount through all of this, Savannah and her family are our top priority. In addition to that, there is also a job to do." That sentence, seemingly simple, almost matter-of-fact, actually contains something profound. She did not say that the job was the priority. She did not say that the network's needs came first. She placed Savannah and her family at the top, and then acknowledged that there was also work to be done. The order of those two things was not accidental. As Hoda herself put it plainly on her return, "We are a family. I'm part of the family. I'm happy to be with you because we show up for each other." In a media landscape that sometimes uses the word family as a branding exercise, those words were being tested in real time against a real crisis, and they were holding. There is something worth pausing on about the specific number in this story. 61. When Hoda Kotb left the Today Show, she did so at 60, describing her milestone birthday as a kind of clarifying moment, a shift in the light that helped her see what she actually wanted from the years ahead. She described her 60 years as a broadcast journalist as meaningful, and then she described the next chapter as something she was ready to fully inhabit. That takes a particular kind of self-awareness. A lot of people in Hoda's position, with Hoda's platform and following and professional standing, would have held on to the desk simply because it is very difficult to let go of something that has defined you for so long. She did not hold on. She chose. And then, at 61, she made another choice, not to undo the first one, but to honor something that, in her view, mattered more in that specific moment than her carefully built new routine. Retirement, in the American cultural imagination, is often framed as a permanent state, a door you close and do not reopen. Hoda's return challenged that framing. Hoda Kotb extended her return to co-anchor Today alongside Craig Melvin, committing to a fourth week in the role. She did not come back for one morning or 1 week or as a favor to the network. She came back and stayed because the situation required it, and because she is someone who stays when situations require it. This is what 61 looks like when it is lived with intention and love. It does not look like a fixed plan executed without interruption. It looks like a woman who knows herself well enough to walk away from something when the time is right, and who knows herself even better when the moment comes to walk back toward something because that is what the people she loves need from her. As the search for Nancy Guthrie entered its 5th week with no resolution, Savannah said in a video that her family still believed in a miracle, and that they were blowing on the embers of hope. The phrase is almost unbearably poignant, the image of someone crouched over a dying fire, breath held, willing a flame to catch. It is the kind of language that comes from a person who is doing everything she can to keep going. And across the country, from a studio in New York, Hoda Kotb was doing the same thing in the only way available to her. She was showing up every single morning and refusing to let the story go cold. Before the State of the Union address, NBC colleague Tom Lamas noted on air that Savannah Guthrie is usually here anchoring all of our special political coverage, adding, "We just want to let you know we are praying for you and your mom. We know you're going to get back here at some point." That quiet acknowledgement, made on one of the most watched news broadcasts of any given year, said something important. The whole institution was holding a place for her. None of this erases the gravity of what the Guthrie family was living through. A woman was missing. Her children were searching. The investigation was ongoing and uncertain. No amount of yellow ribbons or warm words on morning television could change those facts. But what Hoda Kotb's presence did, and what her willingness to speak openly about her love for Savannah accomplished, was something that exists alongside those facts and matters in its own right. It reminded a very large audience that the people who occupy the chairs in our living rooms via the television each morning are real people, with real friendships, real loyalties, and real hearts that can break just like anyone else's. At the end of all of this, what Hoda Kotb showed the world in February 2026 was not a television performance. It was not a public relations strategy. It was not even particularly planned. It was the honest expression of a woman who, at 61, has arrived at a clarity about what actually matters and who is unwilling to let anything, not retirement, not personal plans, not a carefully arranged new life, stand between her and the people she loves when they need her. She left a show that defined her for nearly 3 decades because she was ready to be more fully present for her daughters. She came back to that same show because she needed to be more fully present for her friend. Both of those decisions, seemingly contradictory on their surface,